The snow did not fall, it drifted, like ash settling over a dead world. Serenella Stonefield stood on the cobbled edge of the bridge, the icy railing biting through her thin wool coat, though the cold was a distant mercy compared to the fire in her chest. Below, the river churned, black and indifferent. She held the velvet box in her hand, not a gift received, but a gift returned, a promise broken. The wind howled, carrying the scent of pine and oncoming storm, but she only smelled his cologne, lingering on her skin like a curse. She didn't scream, she didn't weep, she simply let the box drop. It vanished into the dark water, taking her past life with it. Then, she turned toward the trees where shadows moved with eyes of molten gold. The gala at the Thornwell estate was a kaleidoscope of diamonds and malice. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto the marble floors, fracturing into rainbows that danced over silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. For Serenella Stonefield, the brilliance was blinding. She tugged at the hem of her dress, a modest, dove-gray thing she had sewn herself, stitching hope into every seam. It felt woefully inadequate here, a sparrow lost in a cage of peacocks. She stood near a towering arrangement of white lilies, her eyes scanning the crowd for Reginald. He had told her to wait here. "Just stay put, Sarah. I need to speak to my father about us, about the engagement." The word had tasted like sweet wine when he whispered it 2 nights ago. Engagement. After 3 years of scrimping, of waiting, of loving him despite his family's sneers and her own poverty, Reginald Thornwell was finally going to stand up for her. The orchestra swelled, a waltz that sounded like weeping violins. The crowd parted. Serenella's heart leaped, then shattered. Reginald emerged, but he was not walking toward his father. He was walking toward the center of the room, his arm linked comfortably, possessively, through the crook of another woman's elbow. Mira Kingsbury. Mira was everything Serenella was not. Tall, statuesque, draped in crimson silk that clung to her like a second skin. Diamonds choked her throat, glittering cold and hard, but it was the look on Reginald's face that stopped Serenella's breath. He looked content, triumphant. A hush fell over the room as Reginald raised a champagne flute. The crystal rang out, a sharp, piercing note that cut through the music. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reginald's voice was smooth, practiced. "Thank you for joining us tonight. It is with immense joy that I announce the union of the Thornwell and Kingsbury families. To my fiancée, Mira, my equal, my partner, my future." The applause was polite, ripple-like. Serenella felt the floor tilt. The lily's scent turned cloying, suffocating. She took a step forward, her legs numb. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. Reginald's eyes scanned the room and landed on her. For a second, just a heartbeat, his mask slipped. She saw pity there, and annoyance, not love. Never love. He looked away, turning his smile back to Mira, who leaned in and whispered something that made him laugh, a low, intimate sound Serenella had memorized. She didn't make a scene. She didn't scream his name or throw her drink. She was too shattered for theatrics. The betrayal wasn't a knife in the back. It was a wall built brick by brick that she had been too blind to see. He hadn't chosen Mira tonight. He had chosen her months ago, years ago perhaps. In every moment he kept Serenella hidden, in every excuse, in every not yet. She turned, the movement stiff, mechanical. She navigated the sea of bodies, feeling the brushes of silk and the heat of strangers. Whispers trailed her, not about her heartbreak, but about her dress, her hair, her insignificance. "Who is that?" "Nobody, just the help, surely." She burst out of the heavy oak doors into the biting winter air. The cold hit her wet cheeks. She hadn't realized she was crying. The valet looked at her, concerned, but she waved him away, stumbling down the long, winding driveway. She couldn't breathe. The estate sat on the edge of the city, bordering the ancient, sprawling expanse of the Blackwood Forest. She walked until her heels blistered, then kicked them off, continuing in her stockings. The gravel bit into her feet, grounding her in pain. She reached the old stone bridge that marked the boundary of the Thornwell lands. She took the velvet box from her pocket. The cufflinks she had bought him. 6 months of wages. She had skipped meals for these. He hadn't even looked at them before heading to the stage. She dropped them into the river. "Goodbye, Reginald," she whispered, her voice cracking, lost to the wind. A twig snapped behind her, not a human sound, heavier, deliberate. Serenella spun around. The road was empty, illuminated only by the sickly yellow of distant street lamps. But the sensation of being watched pricked at her skin, raising the fine hairs on her arms. It wasn't the gaze of a predator looking for a meal. It was something ancient, something that weighed the soul. She looked toward the tree line. The Blackwood was forbidden. Local legend spoke of beasts and old magic, of people vanishing into the mist. Tonight, the darkness between the pines seemed to pulse. Two eyes glowing like molten gold blinked from the shadows. They were set high, too high for a wolf, too low for a man standing upright. Fear should have sent her running back toward the lights of the estate, but she had nothing left back there. No home, no love, no dignity. "Are you watching me fall apart?" she asked the darkness, her voice hollow. The shadows shifted. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, resonating in her chest. It wasn't a growl. It sounded like an answer. The creature emerged from the tree line not with a pounce, but with the regal, fluid grace of a king entering his court. It was a wolf, but to call it a wolf was to call an ocean a puddle. The beast was massive, its shoulder height easily reaching her chest. Its fur was the color of midnight, absorbing the faint ambient light rather than reflecting it, save for a streak of silver running down its spine like a scar of moonlight. Serenella froze, her breath hitching in a cloud of white vapor. The cold that had been seeping into her bones was suddenly forgotten, replaced by a primal electric terror. Yet, she did not run. Her feet, bleeding and frozen, refused to move. The wolf stepped onto the road. Its paws were the size of dinner plates, silent on the asphalt. It circled her, the movement slow, assessing. The golden eyes locked onto hers, intelligent and unnervingly human in their depth. There was no aggression in its posture, no bared teeth or flattened ears, just an intense, suffocating curiosity. It stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its massive body. It smelled of deep earth, ozone, and something sharp like iron. Serenella trembled, but not from the cold anymore. "Go ahead," she whispered, a tear finally escaping to trace a hot path down her frozen cheek. "I have nothing left to defend." The wolf lowered its great head. For a terrifying moment, she thought it would snap at her throat. Instead, it exhaled, a warm huff of air that washed over her face. It stepped closer, closing the gap, and nudged her hand with its wet nose. The touch was electric. A jolt, like static shock but deeper, ran up her arm and settled in the center of her chest. The wolf flinched too, a low whine vibrating in its throat. It looked at her, then turned its head toward the forest, then back to her. A clear invitation. "You want me to follow you?" She sounded insane to her own ears. Talking to a monster on a bridge at midnight? The wolf turned and began to walk toward the trees. It paused at the edge of the wood, looking back, waiting. Serenella looked back at the road leading to the city, to her small, empty apartment, to the life that had just been gutted by Reginald's ambition. Then she looked at the wolf. The woods were dark, dangerous, and likely fatal, but the city was full of a different kind of death, the slow death of memory and shame. She stepped off the road. The moment she crossed the tree line, the wind died. The Blackwood was unnaturally silent. The snow here was deeper, pristine white, untouched by soot or tire tracks. The wolf broke the path, its large body plowing through drifts, creating a wake for her to follow. They walked for what felt like hours. Her legs burned, her feet were numb blocks of ice, and her vision began to blur. She stumbled, catching herself on a rough pine trunk. The bark scraped her palm. She slid down to the snow, the exhaustion finally overtaking the adrenaline. "I can't," she murmured, closing her eyes. "I can't go further." The crunch of snow stopped. The wolf returned. It loomed over her, blocking out the sliver of moon above. It nudged her shoulder, harder this time, urgent. When she didn't rise, the beast did something impossible. It shimmered. The edges of its silhouette blurred, dissolving into smoke and shadow. Bones cracked and reshaped with a wet, sickening sound that should have been horrific, but felt strangely sacred. The fur retracted, skin knit together, and the massive bulk of the animal reared up and condensed. In seconds, the wolf was gone. In its place knelt a man. He was naked, unashamed, steaming in the frigid air. His skin was bronze, muscles carved from stone and tension. Dark hair fell over his eyes. those same arresting golden eyes. "You must," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, rough with disuse, like stones grinding together. "If you stay here, the cold takes you, or the rogues do." Serenella stared, her mind struggling to process the transformation. What are you?" He didn't answer. He reached down, scooping her up into his arms as easily as if she were made of paper. The heat coming off him was intense, a furnace against her shivering skin. "I am Sebastian," he said, turning back toward the depths of the forest. "And you are trespassing in my kingdom, little bird." "I didn't mean to," she slurred, the warmth of his chest lulling her toward unconsciousness. "I know," Sebastian murmured, his jaw tight. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable, a mix of fury and fascination. Fate is rarely polite. He began to run. He moved with human legs, but with the speed and endurance of the wolf. The trees blurred into streaks of black and gray. Serenella clutched his neck, burying her face in the hollow of his throat. He smelled of the wild, but underneath, there was a scent uniquely his. Spiced amber and wood smoke. "Who is Reginald?" he asked suddenly, without breaking stride. Serenella stiffened. "How do you know that name?" "You whispered it to the river," Sebastian said. "You gave him your grief. He does not deserve it. He chose someone else." "Then he is a fool," Sebastian growled, the sound vibrating through his chest and into hers. "And his folly is my fortune." Serenella didn't understand what he meant. Darkness swirled at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw was a massive stone wall rising out of the mountain face, torches flickering atop the ramparts before the world went black. Serenella woke to the sound of fire cracking. She was lying in a bed that felt like a cloud, buried under layers of thick fur pelts. The room was cavernous, made of dark-hewn stone. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes and celestial maps hung on the walls, softening the harsh architecture. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, the flames casting long, dancing shadows. She sat up, clutching the furs to her chest. She was wearing a long white linen shirt that wasn't hers. It smelled of him. Amber and wood smoke. The door creaked open. A woman entered carrying a wooden tray. She was severe-looking, with gray-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that were sharp and assessing. She wore simple, sturdy clothes, but the fabric looked expensive. "You're awake," the woman said, setting the tray on a bedside table. It held a bowl of steaming broth and a loaf of dark bread. "Eat. The king demands your strength." "The king?" Serenella's voice was raspy. "Sebastian Crestvale, the Alpha King," the woman said the title with reverence and a touch of fear. "I am Araminta Crestwood, the housekeeper of High Rays Keep. You are lucky to be alive, girl. No human crosses the Blackwood and keeps their skin." He saved me." Araminta's lips thinned. "He brought you here. Saved remains to be seen. Eat." She turned to leave, but the door opened again before she could reach it. The room seemed to shrink as Sebastian entered. He was dressed now, in black trousers and a heavy charcoal sweater that did nothing to hide the breadth of his shoulders. He looked even larger indoors, a wild thing contained by stone walls. His presence was a physical weight pressing against the air in the room. Araminta dipped her head low. "Alpha." "Leave us, Araminta," Sebastian said. His eyes were fixed on Serenella. The housekeeper scurried out, closing the heavy oak door with a thud. Sebastian walked to the foot of the bed. He didn't speak immediately. He watched her, his golden eyes tracing her face, her throat, her hands gripping the furs. It felt invasive, yet oddly grounding. "Your feet are healing," he said. "My healers applied a salve." "Thank you," Serenella managed, "for everything. I should go. My job, my apartment." "You have no job," Sebastian said flatly. "I had it checked. You were let go this morning. Redundancy, they called it. But the order came from a Thornwell subsidiary." Serenella felt the blood drain from her face. Reginald. He wasn't content to just break her heart. He wanted to erase her existence, to ensure she couldn't cause a scandal. "And your apartment," Sebastian continued, his voice dropping an octave, "was leased in his name, was it not? The locks have been changed." Serenella stared at her hands. The cruelty was total, absolute. She was homeless, jobless, alone. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. "So you understand that there is no back to go to," Sebastian said. He moved around the bed and sat at the heavy armchair near the fire, crossing his legs. "You are a stray now, Serenella." The word stung. "I am not a dog." "No," Sebastian agreed. His eyes flashed. "You are something else entirely, something inconvenient." "Inconvenient?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "My kind. We are bound by laws older than your cities, laws of instinct and biology. We do not choose our mates. The moon goddess weaves threads and we follow." He paused, looking at her as if trying to solve a puzzle. "I have ruled alone for 100 years," he said softly. "I have fought wars, suppressed rebellions, and held the packs together with iron and blood. I expected to die alone. It is the fate of kings." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered forest. "Then I sent a human dying of heartbreak on a bridge, and when I touch her—" He clenched his fist against the stone frame. The silence in my head, the constant roar of the wolf, it stopped. For the first time in a century, it was quiet. He turned back to her, his expression fierce. "You are my mate, Serenella Stonefield. You are the one thing I cannot kill, and the one thing that can destroy me." Serenella's heart hammered against her ribs. Mate. She had heard the stories, the folklore whispered in the city, but she thought they were fairy tales. "I'm human," she said. "You're a shifter. This isn't possible." "Possibility is irrelevant in the face of reality," Sebastian snapped. "The bond is formed. It is weak because you are human and unaware, but it is there. If you leave, I will hunt you. Not because I want to, but because my wolf will tear this world apart to find you." The door banged open. A man strode in, bringing a gust of cold air with him. He was leaner than Sebastian, with fox-like features and auburn hair. Rowan Valcrest, the beta. "Sebastian," Rowan warned, eyeing Serenella with open hostility. "The council is gathering. They smell a human in the keep. They are not pleased." "Let them gather," Sebastian said dismissively. "They are saying you've brought a pet," Rowan sneered. "A weakness." Sebastian moved so fast Serenella barely registered the blur. He had Rowan pinned against the stone wall, his forearm against the beta's throat. "Careful, Rowan," Sebastian snarled, his eyes glowing. "She is not a pet. She is under my protection." "She is a liability," Rowan choked out. "The Thornwells are powerful in the human world. They have connections to the hunters. If they find out you have her, let them come." Sebastian released him, stepping back. He smoothed his sweater, the violence vanishing as quickly as it had appeared, though the tension remained. He turned to Serenella. "You stay here," he commanded. "Do not leave this room. The castle is full of wolves who are not as controlled as I am." "And if I want to leave?" Serenella asked, finding a spark of defiance amidst her fear. "Am I a prisoner?" Sebastian looked at her, and for a second the mask of the king fell. She saw a deep, aching loneliness in his golden eyes. "You are the only thing keeping me sane," he said quietly. "Call it what you will. But you are not leaving." He turned and swept out of the room, Rowan following with a last dark glare at Serenella. The door clicked shut, the lock sliding home with a heavy thud. Serenella sank back into the pillows. The fire crackled, casting long shadows that looked like claws. She was trapped in a castle of monsters, claimed by a king who looked at her like she was both his salvation and his damnation. But as she closed her eyes, she didn't see the monsters. She saw Reginald smirk as he toasted his new fiancée, and she felt the phantom warmth of the wolf's fur against her frozen hand. If she was going to survive this, she couldn't be the poor girl on the bridge anymore. She had to be something else, something worthy of a king's fear. She threw the furs aside and stood up, walking to the window to look out at the endless white expanse of the Blackwood. "All right, Sebastian," she whispered to the glass. "Let's see who breaks first." For 3 days, Hyray's keep was a gilded cage of stone and snow. Serenella roamed the corridors, her footsteps echoing on the slate floors, a ghost in a castle of predators. She was given free rein of the upper levels, but the heavy oak doors leading to the courtyard remained barred to her, guarded by silent sentinels who watched her with eyes that flashed amber in the torchlight. She wasn't stupid. She knew she was a curiosity, a fragile, furless thing the Alpha had dragged in from the storm. On the 4th afternoon, the isolation drove her to the library. It was a massive circular room in the west tower, smelling of old parchment and dry pine needles. Dust motes danced in the shafts of winter sunlight, piercing the high windows. She was running her fingers along the spine of a leather-bound history of the northern packs when the air pressure in the room dropped. The fine hairs on her arms stood up. She didn't need to turn around to know he was there. "You are restless," Sebastian's voice came from the shadows near the entrance. Serenella turned. He was leaning against a bookshelf, arms crossed over his chest. He wore a simple linen shirt today, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and scarred by old battles. "I am a prisoner," she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Prisoners are rarely content." "You are a guest under protection." "Protection from what? The world? Or your pack?" Sebastian pushed off the shelf and walked toward her. He moved like smoke, silent and inevitable. He stopped a foot away, close enough that she could smell the unique scent of him, ozone and deep forest earth. "Both," he admitted. "My kind does not easily accept change, and you, Serenella, are a seismic shift." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face before he let it drop, as if restraining himself. "Why me?" she asked, the question that had plagued her since the bridge. "You said I quiet the noise." "What noise?" Sebastian's golden eyes dimmed slightly. He walked past her to the window, looking out at the jagged peaks of the mountains. "Imagine standing in a room with 1,000 people screaming," he said, his voice low, "screaming their hunger, their rage, their loyalty, their fear. That is what it is to be an alpha. I feel the pack, always, every heartbeat, every shift in mood. It is a cacophony that never ends. It drives most alphas mad within decades." He turned back to her. The sunlight hit his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw and the exhaustion etched around his eyes. "For 100 years I have lived in a storm," he whispered, "until you." He took a step closer, his gaze intense. "When I am near you, the voices stop. The beast settles. There is only peace. You are the eye of the hurricane, Serenella." Serenella felt a pang in her chest, not fear this time, but something softer. Empathy. She knew what it was like to carry a burden that no one else could see. Reginald had been a burden of a different kind, a constant demand for perfection, a voice telling her she wasn't enough. "And if I leave?" she asked softly. "The storm returns," Sebastian said simply, "and eventually it will break me." The vulnerability of the confession hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Before she could respond, the library doors burst open. Rowan stood there, his chest heaving, his face streaked with soot. "Alpha," he panted. "Perimeter breach, Sector 4. It's not rogues." Sebastian's face hardened instantly, the vulnerable man vanishing behind the mask of the king. "Hunters?" "Worse," Rowan spat, glancing at Serenella with a mixture of loathing and pity. "Mercenaries, high-tech, and they left a message." Sebastian strode toward the door, passing Rowan. "Keep her here." "Guard the door with your life!" "Sebastian!" Serenella called out, stepping forward. He stopped, looking back. His eyes were glowing molten gold, the wolf rising to the surface. "Stay!" he commanded, the word vibrating with alpha power that made her knees weak. "Do not let them see you." He was gone, leaving Serenella alone with the beta who hated her, and the terrifying realization that the war had come to them. And she had a sinking feeling she knew exactly who had sent it. The attack was repelled, but the castle was tense. The air tasted of charred wood and iron. Serenella was confined to her chambers for 2 days, pacing the stone floor until she thought she would scream. On the 3rd night, the lock clicked. It wasn't Sebastian who entered, but Araminta. The housekeeper carried a tray of food, but her usual stoic expression was fractured by worry. "Eat," Araminta said, setting the tray down. "He won't eat, so you must." "Is he hurt?" Serenella asked, abandoning her pride. "Flesh heals," Araminta said cryptically. She hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of paper from her apron pocket. "Rowan found this pinned to a tree near the breach. The alpha burned the others, but I thought, you should know the enemy you face." Serenella took the paper. It was heavy, cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was elegant, jagged, and painfully familiar. "To the beast of Blackwood, you have taken something that belongs to the Thornwell estate. Property theft is a serious crime. Return the girl, and we will not burn your forest to ash. Keep her, and we will bring the sun to your doorstep. R.T." Serenella's hand shook. Property. Reginald didn't want her back because he loved her. He wanted her back because she was a loose end, a possession that had walked away. And now he was threatening to destroy an entire ecosystem, an entire people, to silence her. "He thinks I'm property," she whispered, anger igniting in her belly, hot and sudden. "To men like that, everything is property," Araminta said, her voice softer than usual. "The Alpha, he is furious. He tore 3 mercenaries apart with his bare hands, but he is afraid, girl, not for himself, for you." Serenella looked up. "I need to see him. He is in the war room. He's in a foul mood." "I don't care." Serenella brushed past the housekeeper. Araminta didn't stop her. In fact, she might have even held the door open. Serenella navigated the corridors by memory, following the low rumble of voices. She found the war room on the ground floor. The doors were open. Inside, a large tactical map of the forest was spread across a wooden table. Sebastian stood at the head, flanked by Rowan and 3 other grim-faced wolves. He looked terrible. Bruises bloomed on his ribs where his shirt was torn, and his eyes were wild, the gold consuming the iris. "We double the patrols in the southern quadrant," Sebastian was growling. "If a leaf falls, I want to know about it." "Sebastian," Serenella said from the doorway. The room went silent. The other wolves stared at her, some with hostility, some with curiosity. Sebastian's head snapped up. "I told you to stay in your room." "I read the note," she said, walking into the room. She felt small among these giants, but she refused to shrink. "Reginald doesn't want me. He wants to erase me. He's afraid I'll talk about his business dealings, about the engagement, about how he treats people." Sebastian moved around the table, placing himself between her and his men. "He will not touch you." "He's using high-tech mercenaries," Serenella said, pointing at the map. "He has money, Sebastian, endless money. You can't fight him with claws and teeth alone." Rowan scoffed. "And what do you suggest, human? Throw stones at them?" "No," Serenella said, turning to the beta. "I suggest we hit him where it hurts, his reputation." She looked at Sebastian. "He's trying to merge with the Kingsbury family. Image is everything to them. If the press found out his mental ex-girlfriend didn't run away but was hunted down by mercenaries hired by Thornwell Industries, the merger would collapse. His stock would tank." Sebastian studied her. The rage in his eyes cooled, replaced by a sharp, calculating intelligence. "You want to wage a war of information." "I want to survive," she said firmly, "and I'm tired of running." Sebastian reached out, cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed over her skin, rough and tender. The connection hummed between them, a silent language of reassurance. "Rowan," Sebastian said, never taking his eyes off her, "get me a secure line to the city, and find me a journalist who hates the Thornwells." Free. Rowan looked between the two of them. For the first time, there was a flicker of respect in his gaze. "I know just the one." Sebastian leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "You are dangerous, little bird." "I learned from the best," she whispered. For a moment, the war room vanished. It was just them, 2 broken things fitting together to make a weapon, but the moment was shattered by the howling of a sentry outside, a long, mournful sound that signaled arrival. "Guests," Sebastian pulled away, his face hardening again. "The council, they've arrived early." The great hall of High Rays Keep was transformed. Long tables laden with roasted meats and flagons of dark wine filled the space, but the atmosphere was far from festive. It was charged with the metallic scent of aggression. The Council of Fangs, the leaders of the 6 surrounding packs, had gathered. They were massive men and women, draped in furs and leather, their eyes tracking every movement. They had come to assess the threat of the hunters, but mostly they had come to inspect the Alpha King's weakness. Serenella stood at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows. Sebastian had told her to wait until summoned. She wore a gown Araminta had found, a deep midnight blue velvet that matched the keep's shadows. It was elegant but armored, high-necked and long-sleeved. Below, Sebastian sat at the head of the table. He looked every inch the king, powerful, bored, and lethal. The hunters are escalating, Crestvale." A large, scarred wolf named Draven slammed his fist on the table. "Because of you. Because you harbor a human." "I harbor my mate," Sebastian's voice cut through the noise, quiet and deadly. "A human mate is a liability," a female alpha, Lyra, hissed. She had silver hair and eyes like ice. She cannot run. She cannot fight. She makes us vulnerable. Hand her over, Sebastian. Let the humans deal with their own trash. Serenella's breath hitched. Trash. Careful, Lyra, Sebastian warned, his fingers tightening on his goblet until the metal groaned. You speak of my queen. A queen must have teeth, Draven roared. If she is your mate, bring her out. Let us see if she is worthy of the Blackwood. Sebastian stood up. The hall went silent. Serenella. She took a deep breath. Do not trip. Do not shake. Do not look down. She descended the stairs. Every eye turned to her. The weight of their judgment was physical, a crushing pressure. She could smell their disdain, their hunger, but she kept her chin high, focusing only on Sebastian. He met her at the bottom of the stairs, offering his arm. He didn't pull her behind him. He stood beside her. This is Serenella Stonefield, Sebastian announced, his voice ringing off the rafters. My mate, and if any of you have a grievance with her, you have a grievance with me. Lyra stood up, stalking around the table. She was beautiful in a terrifying way, moving with predatory grace. She stopped inches from Serenella, sniffing the air. She smells of fear, Lyra sneered, and city smoke. She will break the first time winter bites. I survived the bridge, Serenella said, her voice surprisingly steady. I survived the cold, and I am surviving you. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Bold words, Lyra murmured, but words do not stop a throat from being ripped out. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the hall exploded inward. Splinters of wood and iron rained down. The wolves were on their feet in a nanosecond, tables overturned, claws extending. Through the smoke, figures emerged. They were clad in matte black tactical gear, faces covered by gas masks. They held weapons that hummed with electric blue light, pulse rifles designed to incapacitate shifters, hunters. Secure the exits, Sebastian roared, shoving Serenella behind him. Rowan, the north gate! Chaos erupted. The hunters opened fire. Blue bolts of energy crisscrossed the air. When they hit a wolf, the shifter convulsed and fell, paralyzed. Target acquired! A mechanical voice boomed from the leader of the intruders. Subject, Stonefield. Lethal force authorized. Serenella froze. They weren't here to capture her. Reginald had changed the order. He wanted her dead. A hunter aimed at Sebastian, who was fighting two others. Serenella saw the blue glow of the barrel charging up. Sebastian! She screamed. She didn't think. She grabbed a heavy silver candelabra from a fallen table and hurled it. It was a desperate, clumsy throw, but it struck the hunter's arm just as he fired. The shot went wide, blasting a chunk out of the stone pillar. Sebastian spun around, his eyes locking onto the threat. He let out a roar that shook the foundations of the castle, shifting mid-leap. The massive black wolf tore into the attackers, a blur of shadow and fury. But there were too many of them. More poured through the breach. Lyra was fighting near the hearth, back to back with Draven. We are overrun! Sebastian grabbed Serenella's arm, his grip bruising. He was human again, chest heaving, blood, not his own, splattered across his face. Go, he ordered, shoving her toward a small servant's door hidden behind a tapestry. Take the tunnels. Go deep into the mountain. I'm not leaving you. You must, he snarled, desperation cracking his voice. If they take you, they win. Run, Serenella! Run and don't look back! A pulse blast hit the wall inches from her head, showering them in dust. Sebastian turned to face the oncoming wave of black-clad soldiers, his body a shield between her and death. Serenella looked at him one last time, a king fighting a losing battle for a girl who had nothing to offer but a quiet mind. She turned and ran into the darkness of the tunnels, the sounds of slaughter fading behind her, carrying the sickening knowledge that she might have just watched her soulmate die. The tunnels were a throat of stone, swallowing her whole. The air was stale, tasting of ancient dust and forgotten fears. Serenella ran until her lungs burned like coals, her hand tracing the rough, damp walls for guidance in the pitch blackness. The sounds of battle faded, replaced by the terrifying rhythm of her own heartbeat. She emerged hours later into blinding white. The tunnel exit was a fissure in the rock face, miles from the keep, opening onto a logging road buried in snow. She stumbled out gasping, her velvet dress torn and heavy with ice. The relief lasted a heartbeat. Black SUVs idled in a semicircle, their engines purring like sleeping cats. Men in tactical gear stood waiting, not with weapons raised, but with the casual arrogance of those who know the trap has already snapped shut. A rear door opened. Reginald Thornwell stepped out into the snow. He wore a camel hair coat that cost more than her father's life earnings, and his polished shoes seemed offended by the slush. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his voice smooth, devoid of the jagged edges of the violence back at the castle. "You look dreadful." Serenella straightened her spine. The cold wind whipped her hair across her face, but she didn't shiver. She had stood next to a king. A rich boy in a coat no longer looked like power. He looked like a child playing dress-up. "Reginald," she said, her voice raspy but clear, "you sent an army to kill me." "To retrieve you," he corrected, walking closer. He stopped a few feet away, wrinkling his nose at the smell of smoke and wild earth clinging to her. "And to neutralize a threat, do you have any idea the mess you've caused? The PR team is working overtime." "I am not a mess to be cleaned up." "You are exactly that," he snapped, the mask slipping. "You were supposed to disappear, Sarah, fade away. Instead, you run off to play concubine to a beast. It's embarrassing." He reached out to grab her arm. Before she could think, a low growl vibrated in her own chest. It wasn't her voice. It was an echo of the bond, a phantom sound. Reginald flinched, stepping back. "Get her in the car," he ordered the guards, disgusted. "We'll deal with the wolf later. Once I have the land rights to that forest, I'll pave over his den." 2 guards grabbed her. She didn't fight. She couldn't win physically. As they shoved her into the leather interior of the SUV, she saw Mira Kingsbury sitting in the front seat. Mira wouldn't look at her. She was trembling, clutching her phone. "He's going to come for me," Serenella said calmly to Reginald as he slid in beside her. Reginald laughed, tapping on the glass partition. "Let him come. I have thermal imaging, high-caliber rounds, and the law on my side. He's just an animal, Sarah, and animals always end up mounted on a wall." The convoy began to move, winding down the mountain toward the city. Serenella looked out the window at the dense, impenetrable tree line. She didn't feel despair. She felt a strange, humming connection, a thread of gold stretching from her heart back into the dark woods. "I am here," she projected the thought, not knowing if it was possible. "I am waiting." They took her to a warehouse on the outskirts of the industrial district, a vast, hollow space of concrete and steel, smelling of oil and rain. Reginald had set up a command center here, screens flickering with drone footage of the Blackwood. He sat her in a chair in the center of the room, unbound but surrounded by armed guards. "The journalist," Reginald said, pacing before her. "We intercepted your little message. Clever. But money buys silence, Sarah. Always has." "Not this time," she said. She watched the screens. "Look." Reginald turned. On one of the monitors, a live news feed had replaced the drone footage. A banner headline screamed in red, "Thornwell Scandal, Mercenaries on Domestic Soil." "What is this?" Reginald hissed, grabbing a remote. The screen showed shaky cell phone footage, not from the journalist but from inside the castle. Rowan had recorded the attack, the blue pulse fire, the masked men, the chaos. And then, a voiceover from the journalist she had named, exposing the illegal land grab and the hit put out on an ex-fiancé. "Stocks are dropping," Mira whispered from the corner, staring at her tablet. "Reginald, it's a free fall. The board is calling emergency meetings." "Shut up!" Reginald roared, throwing a glass of water against the wall. He turned on Serenella, his face purple with rage. "You did this! You ruined me!" He pulled a pistol from his coat. "If I go down, I'm taking you with me." The lights in the warehouse flickered, then died. Total darkness swallowed the room. The guards shouted, clicking on flashlights, the beams cutting chaotic arcs through the gloom. Thump. A heavy, wet sound, then a scream that was cut short. "Stay close!" Reginald yelled, his voice cracking. "Shoot anything that moves!" But they couldn't shoot what they couldn't see. The shadows seemed to come alive, detaching from the walls. The sound of tearing metal echoed from the roof. Glass shattered from the skylights above. Snow fell into the room, followed by shapes, large fluid shapes. A massive black wolf landed in the center of the circle of light, the concrete cracking beneath his paws. Sebastian. He didn't roar. He didn't snarl. He simply looked at Reginald. The golden eyes were burning with a cold, ancient judgment. "Fire!" Reginald screamed, pulling the trigger. The bullet sparked off the concrete as Sebastian moved with impossible speed. He wasn't alone. Lyra, Draven, and a dozen others dropped from the darkness, a tide of fur and fangs. The mercenaries, for all their tech, were terrified. This wasn't a firefight. It was a hunt. Weapons were knocked aside, men pinned to the ground by wolves who growled warnings close to their jugulars. Reginald scrambled back, tripping over his own feet. He crawled toward the exit, but a shadow blocked his path. Sebastian shifted. The sound of bones reshaping filled the silence. He stood naked, bloodied and terrifying, towering over the cowering businessman. "You threatened my queen," Sebastian said. His voice was a low rumble, shaking the dust from the rafters. I have money," Reginald stammered, holding up his hands. "I can pay you, whatever you want." Sebastian tilted his head. "You have nothing I want. You are a man who builds castles out of lies. And tonight, the wind has changed." Sebastian didn't kill him. He stepped aside. Behind him, police sirens wailed in the distance. The journalist had done their job well. The authorities were coming, not for the wolves, but for the man who hired a private army to murder a woman. Serenella stood up. She walked past the guards, past Mira, who was weeping silently, and stopped in front of Reginald. He looked up at her, pathetic and small. "You were right about one thing," she said softly. "I didn't fit in your world. It was too small for me." She turned to Sebastian. He held out his hand. His palm was rough, warm, and real. She took it. "Let's go home," she said. Sebastian lifted her into his arms, and together they walked out into the snow, leaving the sirens and the ruins of her old life behind. The return to High-Raise Keep was not a retreat. It was a procession. The Council of Fangs waited in the courtyard. The snow had stopped, leaving the world scoured clean and bright under the moonlight. The bodies of the mercenaries had been removed, the damage to the castle already being repaired. Sebastian set Serenella down on the stone steps. He didn't step in front of her this time. He stood beside her. Lyra approached. She was limping, a bandage wrapped around her flank, but her head was high. She stopped in front of Serenella. The silence stretched, tense and brittle. Then Lyra bowed. It wasn't a deep courtly bow, but a dip of the head, a sign of respect from one predator to another. "You threw a candelabra," Lyra said, a hint of a smile touching her lips. "It was a terrible throw." "I panicked," Serenella admitted, her legs feeling like jelly now that the adrenaline was fading. "You stood," Lyra corrected. "When the humans came with fire, you did not run until he forced you. You fought for the pack." Draven stepped forward, grunting in agreement. "The pack protects its own. You are pack now, Stonefield." Sebastian took her hand, raising it to his lips. He kissed her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "The bond," he murmured. "Can you feel it?" Serenella closed her eyes. It was there, a golden cord connecting her to him, but also a web of silver threads connecting her to Lyra, to Rowan, to every wolf in the courtyard. She could feel their relief, their exhaustion, and their fierce protective joy. "It's loud," she whispered, opening her eyes. "Is it too much?" Sebastian asked, worry creasing his brow. "Does the storm return?" She looked at him. The noise wasn't a chaotic scream anymore. It was a symphony. It was belonging. "No," she smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "It's music." Sebastian leaned down and kissed her. It was a kiss of fire and ice, of desperation and promise. The wolves around them howled, not in warning, but in celebration. The sound rose up, spiraling into the night sky, claiming the forest, the mountain, and the girl who had fallen from the bridge and learned to fly. 6 months later. The snow was gone, replaced by a carpet of purple heather and wildflowers. The Blackwood was alive with the sound of birds and rushing water. Serenella sat on the balcony of the keep, a sketchbook in her lap. She wasn't designing dresses for invisible socialites anymore. She was sketching plans for a new wing of the castle, a school for the pups and a sanctuary for humans who, like her, had nowhere else to go. A cold nose nudged her elbow. She laughed, scratching behind the massive black ears of the wolf standing beside her chair. "You're shedding, Your Majesty." Sebastian huffed, shimmering into his human form. He sat on the balustrade, looking out over his kingdom. He looked younger, the lines of stress smoothed away. "Reginald's trial starts today," he mentioned casually. "I know," Serenella said, not looking up from her drawing. "I don't care. He lost everything, the company, the fiancé, the reputation. He lost himself a long time ago," she said. She closed the sketchbook, and looked at Sebastian. "I have everything I need." He hopped down and pulled her to her feet. The bond hummed between them, a warm, constant comfort. "The council wants to know when the official mating ceremony will be," he said, his hands resting on her waist. "Tell them to wait," Serenella grinned, leaning into him. "I'm still getting used to being the only human who runs with wolves." "You don't run with us, Serenella," Sebastian whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "You lead us." He kissed her, deep and slow, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the world in gold, the color of his eyes and the color of her heart. Serenella's journey began with a fall into the dark, but it ended with an ascent into the light. She learned that betrayal is not an end, but a clearing of the path for destiny. In the arms of the Alpha King, she found not just love, but a power she never knew she possessed, the power to quiet the storm and tame the beast. She was no longer the girl on the bridge. She was the queen of the Blackwood, bound by love, freed by courage, and chosen by fate. Did you enjoy Serenella and Sebastian's story? If this tale of heartbreak and healing resonated with you, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more epic romances, supernatural thrills, and stories where love conquers all. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a chapter.